Hello everyone, you welcome to this edition of The Inside. I am Bable Jonathan. The terrorist group Boko Haram has stepped up attacks on civilians in towns and villages of the far north region of the Republic of Cameroon. Human Rights Watch reports that since December 2020, tens of civilians, more than 80, have been killed in Boko Haram attacks in towns and villages of the far north region of the country. Houses have been looted. The international rights group senior researcher for Africa, Ilaria Aligrossi, says Boko Haram is waging a war on the people of Cameroon with a shocking human cost, and several Cameroonian soldiers have also been killed in Boko Haram attacks. And in the latest or the last attack in the locality of Sakme, few dozen of kilometers away from the border with neighboring Nigeria, at least 6 Cameroonian soldiers were killed, according to official information from the governor of the far north region. Meantime, in the northwest and southwest regions of the country, hit by socio-political and security tensions for close to 5 years today, the proliferation of firearms is fast becoming a serious threat. There are fears that the two regions could be flooded with guns illegally imported from neighboring Nigeria, and which could contribute to worsen the situation there. So we're going to be analyzing all this and how these security challenges can be handled. Meet our guest in some few seconds. Our guest today is a professor of political science in the University of Yaoundé 2, SWA, head of Department of International Relations and Conflict Resolution at the University of Boya, academic registrar at the Pan-African Institute of Governance, Humanities and Social Sciences in Yaoundé. He is an expert in conflict resolution, management and transformation. Professor Sir Christopher, you're welcome to the program.
Thank you, Mr. Babila. Thank you for the invitation.
You're welcome. We begin in the far north region of the Republic of Cameroon, where the terrorist group Boko Haram is waging a war, according to the senior researcher for Africa for the Human Rights Watch International Rights Group, Ilaria Aligrossi, with a shocking human cost. What's your analysis of this security situation in the far north region of the country?
Well, the very first thing is terrorism is an asymmetric warfare, which means that it can go up at time and comes down. So what is happening now is they are, and as time goes on, they tend to build up their strategies. They tend to exploit the weaknesses of the other, of the forces. And because of that, they try to attack, and they always look at very soft spot to attack in order to send a psychological message that they are there. And I think actually for quite a very long time now, the government of Cameroon and other governments in the Lake Chad Basin, they have been fighting multinational task force fighting against terrorism using the hard power. But there is one thing which is very common. The soft power is very, very important. What is soft power? How do we now try to eliminate structural and cultural violence found in this area, so that the people will not be able to be converted by the terrorists, that the people, the youth of today, see them as some sort of paradise where they can get jobs, they can get money, and they can get many other things.
We'll come back to that in a short while, but I want us first of all to look at this. You said earlier that at a certain time the attacks will go down, and at a certain time it will increase.
Step up, yeah.
And that is exactly what is happening there, because there was a time that the multinational task force actually succeeded, according to the authorities, to push back the terrorists, and the attacks reduced. But after some time, since December 2020, there has been an increasing level of attacks, with tens of civilians killed, soldiers killed. What can possibly explain this weakness which you're talking about, that the terrorists seem to be exploiting to hit? And
You know, the very first thing is we have we need resources to fight the terrorists. And when these resources are lacking, then it becomes difficult for the government to be able to fight the terrorists effectively. Secondly, the task force that we used to have were being supported by the Americans. And we know what happened with the Americans. They are no more there in the northern region in order to support the government in order to fight against the terrorists. So the terrorists are able to understand all these lapses in the borders of Cameroon, and they every day look for means of getting through our borders, since we have very porous borders. One of the issues is the borders are very porous. You know, for quite a very long time, African governments did not really pay a lot of attention on trans-border security. You know, we consider one country, the other country, to be our brother or sister country, but with the challenges coming up today, like terrorism, smuggling, kidnapping, all these issues have made the governments to stand up.
But it becomes imperative to step up security along the borders. Is there any link between the rising attacks by Boko Haram? Is there any link between that and the fact that Idris Deby, who was doing much in terms of the fight against security with the Chadian forces, notably in the multinational task force? Is there any link between that?
I was developing and coming towards that angle. The death of Idris Deby is a big blow to this fight against terrorism, because he contributed a lot in so many ways, and he was one of the main actors the frontline actors to fight against terrorism. So his death has weakened. We cannot refuse the fact that it has weakened the task force, and that the terrorists, they master all these issues, they master all these techniques, and when they know that there's a lapse somewhere, they try to explore that particular angle. And so I think the death of Idris Deby is one of the biggest blows that we have today in the fight against terrorism in the North problem.
And while some of the inhabitants of the northern regions, or the far north region in particular, young people who were part of the terrorist movement have decamped, have dropped their arms, and are now being reintegrated into the normal life trend through the DDR center over there. There are still many who are still there. There are still many who are joining. What can possibly justify the decision to run towards terrorists instead of running towards the authorities to have solutions to maybe the problems of unemployment that they have?
You know, there are so many reasons. First of all, those who have gone in there, they have realized that the promises that the terrorists used to promise them were not realistic. So they are decamping. Secondly, those who have gone in there, they have realized that terrorism is not a good option to fight and destroy human lives, property. So they are decamping. But there is one thing we have to understand. Why do they go there? One, you see, I've been making a study between the war in what is going on in the Anglophone regions today of Cameroon and the far north region. This is true that terrorism is different from armed conflict, but you will see that there's an aspect where the youths have been completely marginalized and excluded from state politics. The politics have been taken into hostage by very elderly people who have been there for 30, 40 years, and the youth have been clamoring. They have been saying they want to be part of the system. You know, so with this anger, where people are speaking for them, what we call the elitist politics. Elitist politics is not the right politics. We are supposed to empower the youth, we are supposed to empower the women, we are supposed to empower people at the periphery.
The grassroots politics.
The grassroots politics, the bottom top politics. We are supposed to empower them. And it is not supposed to be a slogan, that it should be felt, you know, through employment, through salaries, through participation, through governance, through all these aspects. They are supposed to be part of it, and actually they should see a future. The youth should see that today I am at this level, tomorrow I'll be at this level, and the next day I'll be at the top level. You see, there are so many movements that are growing up in the north, and they are making reference to this aspect, that positions the government has been taking hostage by certain politicians. And this is a big issue that we should not minimize. That is the first aspect. The second aspect is the structural violence. When we talk of structural violence, what do we mean? We talked about the development around the area. How do we develop the roads? How do we develop the hospitals? How do we develop the, give the people, good educational system? All these aspects should be well developed. And if these aspects are developed, they create avenues for employment, they create avenue for justice, they create avenue for security. When these aspects are well developed, the people become confident, and with this confidence, they can no more move to the terrorists, or the terrorists can no more, try to convert them into their acts. But if these aspects are lacking, and we concentrate only on the military aspect, I'm not very confident that we are going to win the war against terrorism.
That's the soft power, strategy that you were talking about.
Yeah, the soft power approach is very, very important to blend with the hard power approach to fight against terrorism.
Right. Now, still looking at the hard power strategy, when those who are supposed to protect the population are being killed in numbers as high as 6 in a single attack. In the last attack in Sakme, at least 6 soldiers were killed. Of course, some of the terrorists too were killed according to information from the Ministry of Defense, but we're looking more at the fact that some soldiers of the Cameroonian Defense Forces were killed. When those who are supposed to protect the population are killed in these numbers, what does it speak of the strength of defense of the Republic, and what impact will it have on the population who are expecting protection from these people who are also being killed?
No, the very first thing I will say, may the souls of the military officials who died fighting against terrorism rest in perfect peace. Actually, they were fighting in defending the national territory, and they meet this demise. It is clear when the military officials are being killed, it therefore means that the power, the strength of the military force is being weakened. And once the strength of the military force is being weakened, then the terrorists will take up an upper hand. Actually, we know when we talk of asymmetric warfare, we are talking about a weaker power trying to fight against a stronger power that is well established. But if they can go to this angle, to this level, where they are able to kill 6 of our military men and women, put it that way, then it is not a very good sign. So the government as well is supposed to step up its security measures to see into it that the military is not being killed in this way. Because now what is happening over there, the people are exposed to danger. The terrorists, they have an easy route to come and attack and kill many civilians. You know, the main focus of terrorists is not to kill the military. It can happen once in a while. But their focus is to attack softer targets, like civilian targets, in order to send a psychological message to the governments that be. And so, when it happens in this way, they have sent the message that they are coming up stronger. And when they send this message, it therefore means that the government is supposed to step up. And to step up as well is not a matter of one day, because it takes time to train the military, to train personnel to become, competent to fight against terrorists. So it is not going to be an easy task, but I think that the multinational task force should come together, look at their strategy again, and see how they can attack this issue, this phenomenon of Boko Haram terrorist group.
Coming back to the soft power approach, earlier you were talking about porous borders. Now, security should be reinforced along the borders, but there's often a problem reinforcing security along the borders because the people are moving across the borders, doing business and so on. And sometimes when security is reinforced, like what happened in the Northwest region, notably in Donga Mantum Division, where the senior division officer decided to ban the movement of people across the borders because of the proliferation of arms, the people tend to suffer. If some kind of stringent security measures were to be put along the borders between Cameroon and Nigeria, in the far north region of the country, it could become very difficult. Like recently, when the borders were closed with Chad, it was quite difficult for the people to leave it because they were suffering the consequences. They couldn't do business, and it becomes very difficult how to equate that, how to balance all of that, making sure that the people are not adversely impacted, but ensuring their security as well.
I think it is a difficult situation, especially when you are fighting such a phenomenon like the terrorist group. However, the government has to look for a middle point. The first thing, there should be a civilian-military relationship where the civilians, not everybody should be considered a terrorist. They have to look for mechanisms of identifying those who are terrorists. And we know many people over this, in the northern part and far north regions, they live on commerce. And so, if we block them from moving, we are creating hardship. And when you create hardship, the youth do not have a place to go, then it may be a possibility for them to start picking up arms or contemplating joining the terrorist group because they don't have any choice. So we have to see that the measures we are taking should not be measures that will push the youth and the people, because one thing with such asymmetric warfare is that the people tend to support these terrorists. You know, not that they support them openly, but you see that they don't care, they don't support the government in fighting against the terrorists. So we should not push the people to think that they have to support the terrorists because the government is making life difficult for them. We should create a corridor where there will be business, there will be circulation of people, there will be movement of people, and there will be movement of goods. And at the very time, step up targeted security. That means security that will go out for particular purposes. Another aspect is that it becomes very difficult to block the people from passing. We have a very long borders with Nigeria, which means that the government
cannot be stationed all along.
Cannot be stationed all along the borders. So when they block the people here, then the people are going to look for other ways, other means to go. And when they look these difficult means, they go there and come back. The prices of goods become, more expensive. And once it becomes more expensive, the people now are not getting what they were expecting to get from the government or to get from their state. And what will happen? There can be what is known as the revolution of expectation. So, in order to avoid the people reaching to the state of thinking of supporting these people in one way or another as some form of a revolt, the government has to really mitigate its position to see that the people in this region do not turn their back against the government.
Looking at the socio-economic situation of the far north region, poverty and hardship is almost the order of the day.
Yeah.
And when you move away from the urban center, the regional capital, for example, it becomes almost another world with all sorts of challenges, infrastructural challenges, roads not there, education quite low, schools, pupils and students studying in very precarious conditions. What should be done there as a matter of urgency to be able to step up some social amenities that will put the people in a relatively more comfortable situation?
That is what we call structural violence, what you have just described. And structural violence is that type of violence that many people don't see. We don't see how people are dying of famine. We don't see how we don't feel it directly. When we talk of structural violence, you have direct violence. With direct violence, when you shoot somebody, everybody sees, and they'll take graphic photos. Don't look, things of that nature. But with structural violence, people are dying daily. You don't have potable water, you don't have good schools, you don't have buildings. At least we have seen those images where you see students or people sitting under the trees and studying. We don't have hospitals, we don't have good roads, and food shortage. All these aspects are aspects that are making people, are forcing some people to contemplate joining any type of radical movement or any type of a terrorist group. So it will be to the advantage to the government and to Cameroon that these aspects are addressed in order to convert the people back to think, as citizens of the state. If this is not done, the people may be converted easily by the terrorists. So it is imperative that these aspects are given to the people of these regions.
Despite all this, there are some of the inhabitants, to the young men, who have taken up that responsibility to stand beside the defense and security forces. But the question is, what can they really do with some of the crude tools that they have? Government has been giving them some aid to help them in contributing to the fight against the terrorists, but some of them have also been killed.
When this Boko Haram phenomenon started, I think almost each and every Cameroonian stood up in support of the military. And now people are still in support of the military, fighting the terrorist group over there. And you see that there are many ways in which, and there are many people who are fighting against terrorism. And it is not only the use of arms that we can use in fighting against terrorists. It can be information gathering. You see, we are living in our communities and we know who is found in our community. And we can identify who is assisting the terrorists. You see, we can give information to the government, but we should be careful not to arm those civilians, because that will become another problem in future. So they can fight, assist the government in one way, but the issue of arming them, tomorrow it will become a problem, because we have to integrate them into the military, or we have many more people having arms outside, or who are well trained, but they don't have any possibility of working somewhere.
To disarm them may be very difficult.
Disarmament is one thing. We can disarm them, but if we are disarming them, then we have to disarm them now with a program. Why are we disarming them, and how are we disarming them? We have to disarm them with a program to say, okay, we will see how to disarm you. We train you in a trade, and after training you in a trade, we put you somewhere. So you will be absorbed, and then you come out from that mentality and the psychological, all those issues. So disarmament is a whole issue on its own that I think we should just leave it and talk about. So they are supporting the military, which is a very good thing. And supporting the military to fight against the terrorist group is very, very positive. And but we have to look now for a way of integrating them so that they should not in one moment think that the ideas of the terrorists are the best.
All right, keeping check on them so that they should not derail.
Yeah, checking them means giving them something to do. If you don't only check them, then you are surveying them. When you check them without giving them something to do, you cannot check them all through. The issue is you have to integrate them in some way and give them something active, so that you should be able to work and earn something, to earn money at the end.
All right. And now we're going to go to the newsstands. Take a look at what the newspapers reported this week. Immaculate Fogwe with the press review.
The Scoop says Boko Haram kills at least 7 soldiers in the Falmouth region. Cameroon Insider reports Boko Haram deadly attacks Defense Minister in the Falmouth to remobilize troops. As reported by the Guardian Post, recent deadly attack military promises difficult day for Boko Haram fighters. The Median, War of Cessation. Joseph Betia Somo, Minister Delegate in charge of Defense, goes to the West region as more soldiers fall in battle. According to the reporter, when elephants fight, the grass suffers. Passengers stranded as separatists ban the circulation of vehicles. A decision meant to counter the ban on the circulation of motorbikes by the Senior Divisional Officer for Mezam Division. As reported by Eden, frustrated Bamenda Ikok road users plead with separatist fighters to reconsider ban. They equally urge the government to reconsider ban on motorbikes in Bali. The Voice Weekender, devastation in Anglophone Cameroon. Amnesty International reveals shocking testimony and satellite images. Another edition of the Garden Post, armed conflict in the northwest and southwest regions. Outcry as government targets francophones fronting to end military option. The Post Weekender, Minfi's delayed report on COVID-19 funds create more confusion. Another edition of Cameroon Insider exclaims, COVID-19 vaccination boost. Johnson & Johnson vaccine is here. The Post, COVID-19 treatment. Government sneakily legalizes 3 traditional medicines but creates controversies. The paper questions if the government is afraid of the reaction of the World Health Organization, loan institutions, and donor agencies. The Median, launching GCE marking in Boya, Professor Pauline Nalova-Lyonga prescribes honesty, fairness, and probity. The Voice, Tokyo 2020 Olympics opening ceremony. Cameroon's glittering Togo outfits grips the world.
Thank you, Immaculate Fogwe, for the press review. Welcome back. We're still with our guest, Professor Sir Christopher, Professor of Political Science at the University of Yaoundé 2. And we are now going to talk about the proliferation of firearms in the northwest and southwest regions of the country, illegally imported through the porous borders with neighboring Nigeria. And before we go forward, I want us to listen to this extract of the Member of Parliament for Dongamantum East Constituency, Honorable Edward Adamu Lambe, and he talks about this problem.
At the beginning of the crisis we have in North and Southwest, if you saw the type of guns the boys had, they were the guns we use. You are from Bali. The guns we use for our cradai, what we used to call in the local language chapboom. Okay, they were local arms that were manufactured by us. Mr. Badla, if you see the separatists nowadays and look at the arms they have, Mr. Badla, I'm sure that some of them are even more armed than some of our military. Because you look at the sophisticated arms they have, and with the technologies they have developed of late, I bet you if the borders continuously left porous as it is, I fear that almost all those villages in Northwest will be flooded with arms. I mean, especially from Moa. I'm talking of my own constituency. Let me give you a simple example, Mr. Babila. About 2 months ago, one gentleman left Nigeria with a speaker. Luckily, one of the military who takes care of Savongari was on guard. He came with a speaker. He was transporting that speaker. He said that speaker had to be taken to Kumbu. And Mr. Babila, luckily, this strong military man insisted that he wants to see what's within the speaker. Mr. Babila, I bet you what came out of that speaker. You had one of these AK-47, you had rocket launcher, you had even rockets within, things that were used. You had bullets in large quantity within that large speaker. That was just the one that was caught. Mr. Babila, we don't know how many have already come in, how many are on their way, if the borders are still left porous as such. So, it is not strange to hear that this person has a gun. He says he's going to fight. I think during the disarmament with our brothers, disarmament in the sense of making them know that there was not going to be any war between the Fulanis and the natives, that we're going to live as one. You hear people will say that, no, if the Fulanis are armed, then we'll have to arm ourselves. If the natives are armed, the Fulanis, then we need to arm ourselves. And where is the market? Market is just about 3 or 4 hours trekking from Mwa to Nigeria. And sometimes those guns will not end in one subdivision for sure. They will go beyond.
There are fears, Professor, that the two regions could be flooded with arms. As a conflict resolution expert, what's your opinion about the impact of this?
It is proven that in Nigeria alone you have about 500 million small arms and light weapons. You know, the collapse of the Cold War led the proliferation of small arms and light weapons in an uncontrollable manner. So they are found almost everywhere. And countries that have conflicts become the clients to those small arms and light weapons. Because as the day goes by, people develop, they gain money, they make drafts, get a lot of money, and they're able to purchase those arms. In a country where there's a war, you always have what is known as war business. There are people who will engage in such acts to import arms into those countries that have wars. So it is true the security forces will be very vigilant, but as I have said, our borders, the borders between Cameroon and Nigeria, is very, very vast and very, very long, in a way that it becomes difficult. The topography is complicated, in the way that it becomes almost impossible in blocking the coming in of these arms. The flow of small weapons and light arms is a characteristic that happens when there is a war. So you have cartels dealing in that, and to stop it from coming, to stop the arms from coming in, becomes very difficult because the arm dealers, the smugglers, they develop tactics almost every second on how to bring it in, and they look for routes on how to bring the arms in. So the best thing to do now is to bring this war to an end, and so that we can train civilians, we can involve them, train them to be able, the civil societies, to be able, we educate them, the civil societies, we educate the civilians to be able to participate in supporting the government to track those who are bringing in arms. Once those arms keep coming, it gives power to those who are on the front line fighting. There's no way. And if the arms are sophisticated, like what you have described, then at one time you will see that they are not as weak as we were thinking, but they are stepping up their levels of attack.
Actually, information we are receiving from those two regions indicates that there has been a constant shift from locally fabricated guns to war guns, M21, M15, and all those guns flowing in from neighboring.
Actually,
Nigeria.
this is a war. When it started, those guys were wearing, we call them changshoes. Not so? They were holding machete. Not so? But today, what are they holding? We see them with they demonstrate
AK-47,
M21, rocket launchers. Now they are making bombs and all those issues. They are importing those arms, and it becomes difficult, you know, to stop it because I don't think we have enough funds to do that. America alone, up to today, America is unable to block the borders between Mexico and America. With the money America has, the means America has, they have tried to build the walls, they have not succeeded. Migrants keep on getting into America on daily basis. And so we should know that if this war does not come to an end, arms will keep on coming into Cameroon on daily basis because smugglers will keep on discovering ways, routes on how to import these arms into the country. And that is why, to make it short, no government has ever won a war against its people. No people have ever won a war against their government. So the issue is for us to go on the dialogue table in order to bring this war to an end.
How far can a decision like the one taken by the senior divisional officer of Dongamantum, banning the movement of persons for a certain period of time between his area of command and Nigeria, especially those in Mua and other localities close to the border of Nigeria, how far can such a decision go to mitigate or rather reduce that illegal importation of arms?
You see, the question is if only these people are involved in the illegal importation of arms. You see, you are creating more problems on those who were not part of the armed cartel. You are pushing them, you are provoking them. You know, we don't, I will not support to put a complete ban on movement. I will support the point of putting the military to be able to control movements. There are ways we can do it. We can go to parks, we can go to different places where we know these people can, you know, transport their arms.
Entrance and exit points.
Yeah, there are some targeted points to go and do that, and not to ban complete movement. What about people who are living on that? Not living on arms, but living on
other business activities.
Yeah, business activities. People who go to Nigeria and other countries and bring in goods, you know, and what will become of them? Do you think they are going to support the measure? No. We have to look into a way that we have to create friendship with the civilians, so that the civilians will participate with the government. But when we use this attitude of repelling the civilians, then it is creating more danger to the state than helping the state.
And the consequences could be very much far-reaching in terms of worsening the situation.
As it has been going on. You know, when we talk of asymmetric warfare, we are not inventing the wheel. We are not inventing the wheel. It did not start here in Cameroon. You see, so we should not claim as if it is something that started here. You read other warfare, other wars, you will see all these things are happening. There are new twists. And with this new twist, we have to see what strategy to take. And the best strategy is to dialogue. And when I talk of dialogue, we should have to carry on sustainable dialogue.
And get the people
strategic
involved.
Dialogue.
Get the people at the grassroots involved in the whole process, so that they can become like more or less a barrier that will hinder the free movement of the people who are involved in illegal business.
We have to accept that there are certain activities that the government cannot do alone. So the government can outsource them to the civil society. We have to accept that we have auxiliaries like the traditional chiefs who are playing a very important role in their communities. We have to accept that there are groups like women groups, youth groups. You see, like today, this weekend, you see the women are speaking at the Congress Center, Palais de Congrès. They have come together, yeah, the peace conference that they have organized we have to empower and support such movements, because such movements will help as well the government in seeing how to bring peace, sustainable peace, strategic dialogue that will be ongoing to see how to solve this problem. And strategic dialogue means bringing the partners, the actors who are concerned in this conflict together to solve it.
But there's something that is, to an extent, punctured the relationship between the population and the soldiers and the government authorities. Some of the incidents occurring in those two regions, houses burnt down, people killed, that have been attributed to the soldiers, have made it in such a way that many are now seeing soldiers not like people who are coming to protect them, but as enemies, as people coming to kill them, coming to burn their houses, coming to destroy. And it becomes difficult to build that civil or military barrier to such illegal activities.
Well, when there is a conflict, what happens? There will be damages. And, in reality, the military is supposed to be the last when we give the stages of resolving conflict, the military comes in as the very last option. Because we know when the military is going out, the military is not going to negotiate. And before you send out the military, you must have exhausted the other pacific techniques of conflict resolution. Once the military goes out, it is chaos. So what we are seeing today is just what is happening. However, we are not supporting the fact that the military should become, very, very destructive.
There's a popular French-speaking...
There is what we know, the international humanitarian laws in terms of armed conflict. How do you fight? Which arms do you use? Where do you fight? And all those aspects. Not only to the military, but as well to the armed rebels as well.
Armed groups.
The armed rebels as well should know how do you fight? Where do you fight? And how do you protect non-combatants? These are aspects that are supposed to be taken into consideration. So where we are today,
unfortunately, some of those aspects seem not to be respected because we see schools that are supposed to be protected, hospitals attacked, so churches
destroyed,
men of God abducted, and so on.
Men of God. So you see, so it is now in a total chaos, and this is something we can avoid. But once it has happened, it has happened. It does not mean that we cannot look away out of it. We can always look away out of it. No matter how bad the situation is, we have not come to the last case scenario.
And that's just what we are going to do after interviews of the week.
We are already placed in those regions, the northwest and the southwest regions. We have shops in Bamenda, Boya, Limbe, Kumba, Bird. Because of the crisis, Mondays, Ghost Town, there's no way. Parents are afraid to send your children to school. They are not sure of buying the books because if they buy the books, maybe the children will not even use it in school.
Suffering, grandmothers are going to carry water right far. Children are suffering. Please, we need water in Tombe.
For more than a month now without water. People are moving from here to Ngap. Even the catchment of Ngap, they say it's bad. We don't know. You go to Tokowas, Tokowas tell you that the council has taken over. The council is telling you that they have not yet taken over. It's a very critical situation. If we now have any health hazard here, people will die.
I've gone to the field myself. We have witnessed a very serious problem. Reaching there, I discovered that there's a serious landslide. And this situation is very, very unbearable. Trees have fallen, and the soil which has buried the pipes is more than 4 meters down. And trees, there are so many trees that need to be cut. We are going to start with Mbule because Mbule, we are going to do it today, and tomorrow we will be going to Kupe. To evacuate the soil, we need to cut those trees in order that we should connect water.
Ever since the pandemic started, first schools had to close. And our business solely depends on schools for us to make our revenue. And with the closure of schools, it really dropped down our turnover, our revenue. It's a drastic situation.
If you would like to build your home, perhaps a bridge, perhaps a road, you have to involve the professional. Very important, because if it's not the case, it's possible to have some collapse of building.
Welcome back. Those were interviews of the week. Now, Professor, we will not stop doing this until we get to the final bus stop.
Sure.
That is peace and normalcy.
Yeah.
We will not stop looking for the way out. We will not stop talking about the way out. And that is why I'm still putting this question to you. How to get out of the troubled waters, the cacophony, the chaos now reigning in those two regions.
We are in a conflict now, and this conflict has really gone into a very alarming stage. But it does not mean that everything is lost. Now is how to bring the parties in conflict to accept the fact that there are parties in conflict. We should come out. You know, formally, before this conflict, we used to have interstate conflict, where the state knows that another state is an actor in conflict. We have as well intra-state conflict, where you have armed rebels fighting against the state. These armed rebels are not terrorists. They are armed rebels. And it will be important for the government to accept and respect the fact that they are actors in conflict. If the government can accept and respect the fact that they are actors in conflict but not terrorists, then they will, that is a step forward.
All right, let me just open a little bracket there, so that you can get this point through clearly. You know, we've been hearing the authorities referring to the pro-independence fighters in the northwest and southwest regions as terrorists. So what you're saying is that it is wrong to refer to them as terrorists. Is that?
I'm not saying that, but I'm saying if you look at the hostage-taking convention of 1972, Article 12 says that when there is an armed conflict, it is referred now to the 4 Geneva Conventions of 1949, which means that they are not terrorists. They are armed rebels, because the acts they are committing are acts of war, not acts of terrorism. And that is why anybody who is committing this act, when the war comes to an end, if an international criminal court is set, they will be judged in this court. Terrorists are not judged in that court. So the acts they are committing are acts of war and not acts of terrorism.
What's the difference between the two? Acts of war and acts of terrorism.
This act, first of all, there's similarity in that the horrible act terrorists are causing, armed rebels are causing. But the difference is that one is governed by the 4 Geneva Conventions, which shows that there are people who are fighting a war. It can be a liberation war, it can be a war of indignity, that fighting for their dignity. It can be, it's a conflict, and once it has been defined as a conflict, if you look at the difference, we know who are the armed rebels. One, they confront the military, the regular military. 2, they are fighting to occupy a territory. Terrorists don't confront the military. Terrorists attack soft targets to send a psychological message. Armed rebels, they confront the military. 2, they claim ownership of territory, partially or wholly. And that is, terrorists don't claim ownership of territory. And terrorists are not covered by the Geneva Conventions of 1949. Armed rebels are covered by the Geneva Conventions of 1949. But the politics is clear. When such conflicts start, in all the countries that I have looked into, the governments will try to win international sympathy. And they'll say, terrorists are attacking the country, terrorists are attacking the country. The international community takes its time and study the conflict to see if it is terrorism or armed conflict. And so, when they don't buy that idea of armed conflict, then of terrorism, then it is qualified as armed conflict. So we have armed conflict here, where, for example, the Amazonians are claiming the northwest and southwest regions. We see them fighting against the regular forces. We see them, you know, there are so many reasons to differentiate between terrorism and armed rebels. You know, and that is where we have to be very clear to make
so in the northwest and southwest regions we have armed rebels, and in the far north region we have terrorists. All right, after that recognition, what's the next step in the way out of
the armed rebels are people who picked up arms because all the channels of communications were blocked. And once the channels of communications are blocked, people have no choice than to invoke violence. And once violence has been invoked, then we have to accept it at one level and dialogue with them. Don't give anybody any conditions. Because before those guys picked up arms, they have prepared whatever they want to do. And now it is time for the government to say, okay, let us dialogue. And in order to dialogue, you need the other partner. You prepare the dialogue together. You prepare where the venue of the dialogue. You prepare who will participate, which means the parties in conflict, not one party.
They agree.
When one party does that, it is what we call in conflict resolution unilateral action. In unilateral action, there's always what we call the wait and see if it will succeed. If it does not succeed, then we have to question what went wrong where and how can we correct it. And so if you look at it closely, the government of Cameroon has done so many things, not so, to appease to bring the conflict to an end, but it is still ongoing.
That means the major national dialogue.
The major national dialogue is one. The creation of the DDR is another one.
Fell in that context of unilateral action. The major national dialogue, does it fall within that context of unilateral action?
Of course, the government did it. The government organized that as the government alone. The government did not contact the armed rebels, to plan it. Because when we talk of organizing something, you have to invite them. You plan it. You plan the process, you plan the venue, you plan the speakers, you plan the techniques to be used in this.
Not just sending them invitation to come.
Not just inviting them. Not just inviting them. So they did not participate from the beginning. And that is why up to today, we see the conflict is ongoing. So, just like in many other countries, it's not only in Cameroon that it's happening like this. If you have tried this approach and it does not work, what do you do next? The next thing you have to do is to say, okay, we have to talk with these guys. You see, the Nigerian government did that in 2008, 2009. The government of Yaradua, he did that. So many in Colombia, they are doing that with the FARC after 40 years. And many other countries are doing that. Dialoguing with armed rebels to see how to bring the conflict to an end. As I've said, no government has won such a war, and no armed rebel has won against their government.
In that dialogue with rebels, that's what seems to be quite difficult to be accepted by many Cameroonian authorities who keep saying, no, we can't dialogue with people who are carrying guns, we can't dialogue with, they use the word terrorists, we cannot talk with these people. When you look at this kind of, what can be qualified as an extreme position, how can things move with this extreme position?
In a conflict, we always have what we call positions. And if positions are not what we look into, because if you look only into positions, you will never solve a conflict. Just as they are saying, we can't dialogue with you, the terrorists, the secessionists are saying that we have to break away. We have to restore our territory. So they have their own position. So positions are usually extreme. And that is where we have to look at the interests. What are the interests of the government? What are the interests of the restorationists or the secessionists? And from there, we'll see that they will move from their position. That's the first thing. Second point is that there is what we call the hurting stalemate. The hurting stalemate is that it will reach a time where nothing good is coming, but just the killings and the destructions, then that will be the ripe moment. Unfortunately, the ripe moment is coming when so many people might have been killed, a lot destroyed, and all these issues. But at that moment, both camps will realize that you don't win such a war. So you have to sit down and talk.
You have to sit down and talk.
And now, sitting down and talk, sitting down on the basis of equality, because there are both parties in conflict. Don't go as, no party should go as if the party wants to dominate the other.
That's exactly what I wanted to talk about, because some are seeing this coming together to sit down and talk with the rebels as equating government and the other fighting.
Who is the government?
Or equating the head of state, equating the prime minister and the other people who are fighting, putting them on the same scale, and they think this is wrong.
Well, you know, when we talk of ministers, what is the meaning of a minister? From the Latin word, it means servant. People who are supposed to serve the people. When you take ministers to become people, you know, then if you give certain status, that is where it becomes difficult. And then secondly, who is the government? Or talk of sovereignty. Who is sovereign? The people. Do you understand me? So when it comes to this level, we have to go to those basic definitions. You see that when part of your sovereignty is not satisfied, then you as a servant of the state, because the minister means servant, as a servant of the state, you have to look for the reasons why part of the sovereignty is not satisfied. But if we think that giving us those positions make us to become superior to the people that we are supposed to govern, then that is an error.
We have seen elsewhere in other African countries, the president or the top government authorities coming to sit with the rebels. But in Cameroon, do you really foresee this happening? The head of state coming to sit with Sisiku Ayuktabe, with Dr. Sako, and all the rest, to discuss on the same table to say, okay, let's agree on this matter, let's try to see how to solve it and put the guns down?
It may one day happen, because we are getting to close to 5 years, not so? And the disaster is increasing almost on daily basis, not so? So it will come to a time that the government and the secessionists will move from their denial positions and come and sit on the table. It will come a time that you will realize that in this typology of conflicts, the non-state actors are parties in a conflict. There are parties in a conflict. That is why we call the non-state actors who are perpetrating a conflict. So there are parties in a conflict. And if the government understands that, then the secessionist understands as well that the government is a party to the conflict, then they will sit down one day and talk. I believe that there's no way we'll go out of this conflict without real, inclusive, fair and transparent dialogue.
And what should be the nature of that talk? A negotiation? A dialogue?
I have heard people trying to differentiate dialogue from negotiation. Negotiation, what is dialogue? Dialogue is when you talk. Negotiation is one of the techniques of dialoguing. And people mix up negotiation and mediation. Like what took place in Cameroon is known as the conflict workshop, problem solving workshop.
The major national dialogue.
Yeah, the problem solving workshop. That is another form where dialogue can take place, real dialogue can take place. And in this aspect, what is supposed to be done is we need to train the people. Like during that conference, we put our 1 or 2 days to train the participants, prepare them to be ready for dialogue, prepare them to be ready for peace, prepare them to be ready to change their positions.
And make concessions.
So if it is well planned by the actors, then there will be 2 days just to train the actors, the participants, so that they will at one time realize that this conflict came to a certain time that people were being controlled by the conflict and not that people were controlling the conflict. And when people start understanding that they were caught in a conflict trap, they can start nursing that attitude of forgiving one another. So we must do some training, prepare the parties in conflict to be ready to embrace one another.
And accept
to
the outcome.
be ready to dialogue. To be ready to dialogue before now you move into it. And when you move into it, then you can bring it now, for example, mediation.
A third party.
You bring mediation or you bring conciliation in such issue. So the process and everything should be well structured in a way that you are taking the people to from one stage to the other without them realizing it.
Okay.
That is the problem-solving workshop. And then you can bring in the different techniques. It is a multifaceted. This type of conflict is multifaceted. We use the multifaceted approach to solve it. But I'll honestly tell you, the military option is not the best option.
Government should reconsider that option.
I think so.
All right. Now, there is a conference coming up in Ghana.
Yeah.
Peace conference. That conference is also coming as part of the solution, trying to find a way out, trying to contribute in pressing towards the much expected and desired peace and normalcy.
Now, we have the Dove lobbying group that is based here in Cameroon,
right,
and in which I'm one of the members of that group, and working with the Pan-African Organization for Research that is based in Ghana. We are trying to organize a conference in Ghana. Our main objective is that we have seen that the armed rebels, they are too factionalized. And when they become too factionalized, it becomes difficult for the government to dialogue with any of the groups. Because the government can dialogue today and tomorrow the next group comes up. So one of the aspects we wish to do there, first of all, is to carry on this training as well. Training to accept to dialogue. 2, how to reconcile the factions, the different factions. 3, to catalog as former British Southern Cameroonians, to catalog the causes of this conflict that will be acceptable to the different groups. We are not going to Ghana to resolve the conflict. No.
We're going to find a way out.
We are going to find a way out, to let them find a way out. First of all, to reconcile themselves. Secondly, to carry on training, to train the guys to be ready for dialogue. And then thirdly, for them to catalog the causes to the acceptance of the different groups. Fourthly, to build a way they think they can propose the dialogue can take place. The day the government will accept to dialogue.
That's what late Christian Cardinal Toomey tried to do with the All Anglophone Conference, but unfortunately it never took place.
The date is not fixed yet.
Okay, the date is not fixed yet.
Yeah.
Okay, and who are those who are expected in that meeting?
In the meeting in Ghana, the civil society, the women's group, the traditional rulers, the religious rulers, and then we move now to the other side, those in the diaspora. Because now, today in the world, the diaspora has become a force. And this force is being assisted by the social media, the ICT. And we see the role the diaspora is playing. So, those different groups that are based out of the country are very important, and we think that it will be important to invite them to the conference.
Right, unfortunately some may not be able to take part, like Sisiko Ayuktabe, Pen Terence.
Those in the prison, we know that they have representatives outside. Sisiko Ayo and we know they have representatives outside. Right. So the different organizations are outside. And they are very important, very, very important actors in it. And we know we are going to contact their organizations.
All right, so maybe we'll round up with how far you've gone with the organization of that conference. Is it moving smoothly? What are the challenges of bringing all these people together?
Yeah, it's not easy because we have been working on the ground trying to talk to so many groups, civil society organizations, talking to different traditional rulers and different people. People from all the parties, political parties are invited, because it is clear, we make this very, very clear. We are not segregating or discriminating against a particular political party. And if possible, we invite members from the government to become observers. So there's nothing we are hiding there. There's no secret about it. So it is very, very challenging, but at least we are progressing. And we think that when there are certain things that are still disturbing us, at least we have started getting funds from other sources, not within Cameroon. And so we think that when everything will be in place, then we'll give the date. For now, the date, we have not yet made the date.
All right. Thanks very much for your time, Professor, and for the insights.
Thank you very much, Mr. Babila, and we thank Equinox.
I want to remind our viewers that you're a professor of political science at the University of Yaoundé 2. You are the head of Department of International Relations and Conflict Resolution at the University of Boya, academic registrar at the Institute of Governance, Humanities and Social Science in Yaoundé, and you are an expert in conflict resolution, management and transformation. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for the invitation, Mr. Babila.
Thanks, ladies and gentlemen, for staying with us. That's it for today. Goodbye.